we all have witnessed and experienced the diverse nature of elections, which is by no means unique to Nigeria. It has happened in many different countries. Every country is unique, and the fundamental lesson or takeaway is just to learn and appreciate the diversity of different countries. Today we're very happy that you are here. We appreciate and acknowledge your presence, which is a solidarity and confidence in the work of NDI and IRL. Today, I'm joined by, this is the leadership team. From my immediate right, you have JT, we call him, it's John. I can't pronounce his family name, but JT, we call him JT. Fondly call him JT. And there we call Dr. Daniel, but we are all colleagues, we become brothers and sisters. So I call him Dan Twinning. Then Ambassador, I say Derek Michel. And then we have Brother Chris, just Chris, because the family name is difficult. not as much as mine, Tambajan. So back to business. They are going to give you we have been able to observe many experiences, not only the nice ones, but truthful ones, experience that we want to share with you as other people like Yaka yesterday did, and others are going to do, the African Union, the Commonwealth, the ECOWAS, United Nations, and other organizations have done in the past. One thing we want to say is that we have been here as a unified force, the international community, because together we are stronger, and together we can leverage our voice and support to the democratization of Nigeria. We are going to give the press release. The narratives are going to be shared with you in hard copies, but my colleagues will give you the highlights. Here, Chris will provide the overview, JT the context, Derek will provide the electoral observations, the concrete, which are by no means different from other people, but sometimes you might find certain things, takeaways that might be different from other missions. And Dan, of course, will give the way forward, which are going to be sound recommendations not only to government, but the different stakeholders. Because in a democratization process, it takes all the stakeholders to stand up, fulfill actively and effectively their roles and responsibilities in the process. On this note, I want to re-echo the gratitude of the National Democratic Institute, the International Republican Institute, and on my own humble behalf as leader and a woman to call on the different speakers. It's going to be very interactive, so they will be introducing themselves again as we go by. Have a good day, and I pray to God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to give Nigeria the best peaceful elections, and for the winner to be inclusive, because that is the benchmark for democratization, and for the loser to accept in good spirit. Thank you so much.
Offered by the International Observation Mission of the International Republican Institute and the National Democratic Institute to Nigeria's February 23rd, 2019 Presidential and National Assembly elections. The 40-person mission with members from 19 countries was co-led by former Vice President of the Gambia, Her Excellency Fatoumata Tambadjan, NDI President Ambassador Derek Mitchell, and IRI President Dr. Daniel Twinning. The mission visited Nigeria from February 11th through the 25th, 2019, with some members, with some turnover in leadership, and members midway due to the 1-week delay of the polls from February 16th to February 23rd. The original mission included amongst its leadership former President of Botswana, His Excellency Festus Mogae, former President of Latvia, Her Excellency Vera Vicky Fredberger, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Ambassador Johnny Carlson, and IRI Vice Chairman Randy Schöneman. The mission deployed 20 observer teams to 16 states, covering all 6 geopolitical zones and the Federal Capital Territory. Through this statement, NDI and IRI seek to reflect the international community's interest in and support to the democratic electoral processes in Nigeria, provide an accurate and impartial report on the electoral process to date, and offer recommendations to improve future elections. The mission expresses its condolences for the loss of life in election-related violence and salutes the Nigerian people for their resilience. The mission builds on the findings of joint IRI-NDI pre-election assessments conducted in July, September, and December 2018. Reports submitted by NDI and IRI observers that were deployed in each of the country's 6 geopolitical zones and the FCT in the pre-election period, and those deployed for the February 23rd polls, and additional reports submitted by thematic technical experts and in-country staff. The mission conducted its activities in accordance with Nigerian law and the Declaration of Principles for International Election Observation. The mission collaborated closely with other international observer missions that endorsed the declaration, and with YAGA Africa, one of Nigeria's leading civil society organizations, which deployed more than 3,900 citizen observers on election day and conducted a parallel vote tabulation (PVT) or quick count. The mission is grateful for the hospitality and cooperation it received from all Nigerians with whom it met, especially voters, government officials, officers of the Independent National Election Commission (INEC), and polling officials, party members and candidates, citizen election observers, civic activists, and members of the National Peace Committee. The mission notes that Nigeria has achieved significant democratic gains over the past 2 decades since the return to civilian rule, including in managing elections. High levels of citizen engagement in supporting inclusive and credible polls through voter education and election monitoring demonstrate the strong commitment of Nigerians to their democracy. On February 23rd, millions of Nigerians turned out, waited patiently throughout the process, and cast their ballots peacefully. However, the last-minute postponement of the elections by INEC and significant delays in the opening of polling units risked undermining citizen confidence in elections and disenfranchising voters. As stated by YAGA Africa, quote, Nigeria missed an opportunity to improve the quality of its elections as compared to 2015, end of quote. Last-minute election postponements should not become the norm in Nigeria. Also, the mission notes that political parties are the weakest link in the chain of efforts to deepen Nigeria's democracy through more inclusive and peaceful polls. Party leaders and candidates carry significant responsibility to promote peaceful conduct by their supporters and foster inclusive politics. The mission highly appreciated that, despite the many challenges Nigerians exhibited their strong dedication to electoral and democratic governance. The NDI-IRI mission stresses that this statement is preliminary in nature, with elections postponed in parts of 3 states. The tabulation and announcement of final results have not been completed. As this process continues, the mission calls on Nigerian political parties and candidates to cooperate in good faith with INEC, political leaders to adhere fully to the 2019 Abuja Accord and respect the will of the Nigerian people as expressed through the ballot box, and for INEC to release official results in a timely manner. The mission recognizes that ultimately it is the people of Nigeria who will determine the credibility of their elections. IRI and NDI will continue to watch the remaining phases of the electoral process, including the announcement of official results and swearing in of newly elected officials.
Many Nigerians believe that the peaceful transfer of power between parties after the 2015 elections, the first time in Nigerian history, increased citizen and political engagement in the lead up to the 2019 elections. The 2015 experience underscored for Nigerians that credible elections matter. Nigerians undertook many initiatives to enhance citizen participation and create an enabling environment for credible polls. However, the failure to enact the amended Electoral Act was a missed opportunity for codifying recent improvements in the electoral process. Moreover, the absence of internal democracy within political parties continues to hinder women and youth from rising within the ranks and running as candidates for elected office. The last-minute delay of the presidential legislative elections in the early hours of Election Day on February 16th also contributed to voter apathy and the lowering of confidence in the Electoral Commission. I'll try to be short here with some electoral improvements since 2015. 1, advancements for youth, women, and persons with disability. Approximately 51% of those voters are aged of the 84 million registered between 18 and 35. Advocacy groups worked with INEC to adopt measures to facilitate accessible voting for persons with disabilities, notably through a national campaign on the use of a Braille ballot guide. 2, consolidation of electoral offenses. INEC updated the 2019 election guidelines to require that voters possess a valid permanent voter's card. They also notably instituted measures to protect the integrity of the vote, such as mandating that voters not use cell phones while in the voting booth. 3, Nigerian-led initiatives to support inclusive, credible, and peaceful elections. And you can see in our statement, we list a large number of Nigerian organizations that we acknowledge. And we acknowledge throughout this process and continue to say, this is a Nigerian process for all Nigerians. We are here to support that process. So I urge you to take a look and really refer to those groups and elevate them. It's also important to acknowledge the work of the National Peace Committee, which was very important. A few on the persisting challenges since 2015. 1, weak internal democracy within political parties. And this is a key one. Political parties remain the weakest link among Nigeria's democratic institutions. Contentious and at times violent party primaries contributed to party factionalism and resulted in pending litigation for more than 600 instances. 2, unfulfilled promises of electoral reform. The failure to enact an amended electoral code early in the process was a missed opportunity to codify important improvements since the 2011 elections. This bill, if enacted, would have also introduced increased penalties for vote buying and would have improved the process significantly. 3, slow resolution of election disputes. Long delays in resolving disputes stemming from party primaries left INEC with barely a month to print ballots and result sheets. Most judgments remain pending by Election Day. Moreover, and this is notable, cases from the 2015 elections still remain in court. 4, multiple sources of insecurity. Despite repeated appeals, instances of violent clashes between party supporters and the use of inflammatory language by political actors increased as Election Day approached. Next, hate speech and disinformation. Nigerians are increasingly looking at social media platforms as a source of their news. Overall, the mission heard reports that it was challenging for voters to obtain verifiable information in deciding for whom to vote. The spread of hate speech via social media and in public settings is also worrisome, including hateful language targeting women candidates or fueling regional, ethnic, and religious differences, as noted. And finally, last-minute postponement of elections. It is highly probable that such a late postponement had negative effects on voter turnout, created controversy about the duration of candidate and party campaign activity, imposed significant additional economic costs for Nigerians, many of whom traveled to their constituencies to vote on February 16th. And most significantly, the delay undermined public confidence in INEC.
I want to reaffirm that the mission noted with great admiration that despite many challenges, tens of millions of Nigerians demonstrated their resilient commitment to democracy by voting on Election Day. They truly were the heroes of Election Day. Those who voted waited patiently to cast their ballot, often despite long lines, delays, and general confusion. Women and youth served as polling officials, party agents, and observers. However, IRI and NDI observers noted significant impediments to voting for persons with disabilities and the elderly. In addition, observers found that the location of polling units for internally displaced persons, or IDPs, was changed at the last minute from camps to wards in some locations, which could have impacted IDP enfranchisement. Next, on the setup and opening and the material deployment of materials on Election Day. A majority of polling units observed by the mission did not have essential materials and polling staff in place by 8 a.m., and as a result, opened late. Media and other observer reports also indicated that more than half of the polling units were not open as of 10 a.m. Some polling units observed by the mission did not commence voting until 1 p.m., just 1 hour before the polls were intended to close. In some cases, IRI and NDI observers noted that polling officials lacked understanding about how to orient or use the materials in the polling unit. Observers found many polling units to be overcrowded and located in areas lacking sufficient space for the number of voting points, contributing to an overall environment of disorder and tension. Now, the voting itself, observers noted that the overall environment was peaceful and that polling officials generally adhered to voting procedures. Observers noted few instances of voters being turned away. However, frequent failures of smart card readers to authenticate fingerprints contributed to frustrations among polling officials and stymied the process. Observers noted with concern numerous instances in which the secrecy of the ballot was not protected. For example, voting cubicles were not provided in all polling units. Even with voting screens, the setup of the polling unit did not always guarantee secrecy of the ballot. Moreover, party agents in many polling units observed provided actual assistance to voters in violation of procedures. In urban and rural areas alike, observers noted that polling units were often not accessible to persons with disabilities. Magnifying glasses and ballots for the visually impaired were not seen by most NDI-IRI observers. When asked, numerous polling officials were not even aware of or not using the EC40H form for documenting the number of disabled voters. In closing, polls, INEC extended voting past 2 p.m. to make up for delayed polling unit openings. However, IRI NDI observers found the notification to extend polling hours had not reached some polling officials. Overall, polling officials followed the counting procedures in polling units where the mission observed, but in many polling units, the counting and tabulation processes continued late into the night. And according to Yaga Africa, 19% of polling units did not publicly post the result forms at the polling unit in violation of procedure. Nonetheless, the mission wants to commend the dedication of polling officials, many of whom were members of the National Youth Service Corps, who remained resilient in working these very long hours. Security forces did a commendable job exercising restraint in most areas. Observers noted that security officials overall acted professionally and impartially. Police showed restraint even during contentious voting processes. Finally, on election offenses and violence, observers reported disruptions and intimidation by party agents and campaigning in some polling units, which contravened regulations. Notably, observers reported many instances of party agents overstepping their responsibilities, often directing operations in the polling unit, and in a few cases, assisting in quotes, voters to fill and cast their ballots. While observers noted few cases of overt vote buying on election day, they reported that less visible forms of voter coercion may have influenced the integrity of the process. Though overall election day was peaceful, media and other observer groups have reported injuries and loss of life, including that of at least one polling official. And as Chris said at the start, the mission wants to express its deepest condolences to all the victims and their families for that loss.
Look, we're keen to engage with you, so I'll try to do this briefly, but I do just want to say what a pleasure it was for all of us, not just us on the stage, but all of us, all of our delegates and staff, to engage with so many Nigerians all over your country who believe so much in the future of Nigeria, who want to make Nigerian democracy work and work better. So we offer our recommendations in that spirit to support the aspirations of the almost 200 million Nigerians who want their democracy to work even better over the coming period. I will also say, as an American, that our delegation represented 19 countries, our observer delegation, IRI and NDI. A majority of our delegates were from Africa. So these are not American recommendations. These are recommendations from all of us who come and have looked at the situation here. We broke our recommendations into two categories. There's a set of short-term recommendations, which really are for the immediate period before the elections that are coming up in less than 2 weeks here. So we think that there are some things that the Nigerian system could do immediately in the next 10, 12 days to effectuate improved electoral processes for the gubernatorial and state elections in the weekend after next. We then will offer some medium and longer term recommendations, but let me start with those immediate short-term recommendations. To the government, to ensure adequate security to support and protect INEC deployment and voter engagement. To INEC, to intensify communication and outreach to the Nigerian public and stakeholders in the electoral process. To improve plans for distribution of sensitive election materials, including ballot papers and result sheets. To ensure ad hoc polling staff are adequately trained in polling procedures, including the use of smart card readers, guidelines for assisted voting, and ensuring ballot secrecy. To fully implement the disability framework by ensuring that all polling units are accessible to persons with disabilities. To fully implement the IDP framework by making better provisions for intra-state IDPs to vote. To improve communication with polling staff throughout Election Day. To make polling unit level results publicly available in a machine-readable format and in a timely manner. Now, our recommendations short-term to political parties and candidates include to respect the rule of law and to call on supporters to remain peaceful before, during, and after the announcement of results, to reconfirm their commitment to the NPC peace accords and existing codes of conduct, including by conducting peaceful campaigns and denouncing members or supporters who use hate speech, incite violence, or participate in vote buying, to instruct party agents to refrain from interfering in election day processes, including through various attempts to coerce voters, to refrain from disseminating false or misleading information to citizens, to channel electoral complaints and disputes through established legal processes. Our short-term recommendations to civil society include redoubling efforts to promote peaceful elections and educate voters on voting procedures and the importance of their vote, to continue to observe and report on electoral processes to ensure accountability, and, in coordination with the media, to enhance efforts to counter false narratives, disinformation, and fake news. Our short-term recommendations to security agencies: maintain the highest level of professionalism, understand their role on election day, and continue to take steps to assure the public of their neutrality. Support INEC to ensure the integrity of balloting and collation processes. Work with INEC to investigate electoral offenses and take appropriate measures to sanction offenders. So those are our immediate short-term recommendations. And then over the longer term, thinking about the next Nigerian elections in 2023. To the government of Nigeria, we recommend immediately after these elections, pursue a comprehensive and inclusive electoral reform process, drawing upon various recommendations from relevant committees to codify improvements in election procedures. Establish the National Electoral Offenses Commission and the Political Parties Registration and Regulatory Commission. Review the timeline for resolution of electoral disputes and ensure timely approval and release of the election budget. Our longer-term recommendations to political parties: strengthen mechanisms for internal democracy and promote an inclusive environment in which women, youth, and those with disabilities can participate fully and equally in the electoral process without fear of intimidation, coercion, violence, bullying, or other forms of abuse. Engage in transparent, inclusive, and credible candidate nomination processes. Develop party platforms that enhance confidence in electoral and democratic processes and institutions. To INEC, our longer-term recommendations include conducting a comprehensive and thorough audit of preparations for these 2019 polls to identify the various shortcomings that contributed to the election delay and election day challenges. Make those findings public, and engage in a consultative process to address deficiencies and rebuild public confidence. Develop and adopt a strong strategic communications plan building on the lessons learned from 2019 in order to promote transparency and public trust in the electoral process. Revise election guidelines to accommodate voters on official duty on election day, including those who are unable to vote, polling officials, security agents, citizens, observers. Make the continuous voter registration process more accessible to voters through technology advances that would allow for immediate issuance of a PVC upon registration. Create more polling units and reassess polling locations to assure sufficient space and accessibility. Enhance training for ad hoc polling officials to ensure sound knowledge of procedures. Fully implement INEC's gender policy and disability framework. Establish more detailed and timely guidelines and procedures to ensure enfranchisement of IDPs. Our longer-term recommendations to civil society: coordinate efforts to advocate adoption and implementation of electoral reforms, work with INEC and the National Orientation Agency to better coordinate voter education, messaging, and campaigns, conduct civic education between elections to enhance citizen understanding of and engagement in democratic processes, together with the media, educate citizens on the dangers of disinformation and misinformation in the public sphere, and promote credible alternative narratives, truthful narratives in the media and online. Share best practices and lessons learned to strengthen synergies and peer-to-peer support among civil society actors. Our final set of recommendations to the security agencies: continue to improve coordination with INEC on provision of electoral security, including participating fully in INEC's electoral security training and enhancing transparency around election day deployments. And our final recommendation to the judiciary: ensure the timely and fair resolution of electoral disputes. Now, I'll close with the comment that in previous years, suggestions by a range of reputable domestic and international observation missions in Nigeria went unheeded. Our mission hopes and urges Nigerian stakeholders will consider seriously these and other recommendations to improve the electoral process and make democracy work better in Nigeria.
A wide view and a wide range of expertise, individuals who are not necessarily American or certainly representing any particular agenda, ideology, or anything else. It's also important to note that as reflected in our statements, we adhere to very strict principles, and the work that we do around the world, this is not something new, it's not something we do one time in Nigeria. If you look at what we've said, we've observed collectively as organizations over 200 elections, more than 200 elections in over 50 countries. And we take this job very seriously. And we do not engage in partisan games or anything of that sort. We are looking strictly at the electoral process and looking at ways in partnership and in lockstep with what Nigerian civil society and Nigerians across the country are looking at in terms of this, making sure that these elections are fair.
Through very clearly in our statement, we deplore all forms of violence, especially violence around elections that prevents citizens from being able to exercise their civic duty. It's very unfortunate to have to keep statistics on incidents of violence. And so we approach this by making rather an appeal that Nigerians have to continue to work strenuously to avoid incidents of violence around elections. To paraphrase one of your Nigerian political leaders, one's victory for a political candidate or a political leader is not worth the blood of a Nigerian. And our hope is that Nigerians will continue to work to avoid violence around elections. You may have noticed that you would notice that in our statement we also make recommendations on how various stakeholders could contribute to making this noble goal of non-violence around elections a reality. And that's why we call on the security services to remain very professional. That's why we call on political parties, especially political parties, leaders and their supporters, to refrain from acts of violence. Because we've monitored every election in Nigeria since 1999, we should also acknowledge that while we decry the loss of life and the incidents that led to injury and destruction of property around the current elections, we should acknowledge that it's a better state today. Nigeria is a better state today with regards to issues of election-related violence than was the case in the late 90s and in the early 2000s. But we must commit, and that's why we make the recommendation that Nigerians must commit at all levels, from the government through the security agencies, through political parties, and civil society through their voter and civic education, to make sure that we can get to the point where Nigerians will go to every election as a celebration of their democratic commitment, and less as a battle that should result in the loss of life.